Okay, let's kick it off again. Sorry, we had a false start, so we're going to start from the top again. Good afternoon. I'm Peter Keller, head of the EC board. Thanks to all of you for joining us. This is our fifth update call to let you know a little bit of what we're seeing across the many programs that we support, and to let you know how we're attempting to respond to increased needs related to the pandemic. You all have seen the news across the country, the dramatic loss of employment, the high numbers of people filing for unemployment. This has really led to an unprecedented increase in demand for feeding assistance. In some cases, programs that we support have talked about seeing 2 to 3 times the number of people coming seeking assistance. Many of the people we serve have already lived on a shoestring budget and have a tough time making ends meet every month, even when they're employed. Obviously now, with this massive swelling of the ranks of the unemployed, people are even harder pressed to feed their families. This is made worse by the closure of some food pantries. A number of programs, including some of ours, have had to change operations or close just to make sure they protect the health and safety of their clients and of their volunteers. As programs close, that drives more people to the remaining programs that are open. Last week, the Times reported that 2 of the largest food charities in New York have seen a 37% reduction in the number of pantries that are operational. And we've begun to hear reports from our programs, and Patrick will give you some more detail, about an uptick in demand coming mainly from people who have never gone to a food pantry before, but who suddenly find themselves without options. You're all aware this is unlike anything any of us have seen in our lives before. And so one of the reasons of these calls is to let you know some of what we're seeing, to let you know some of what our friends and neighbors are doing to help others across the diocese. Patrick Bergquist, our director of programs, is going to share some news on what he's seen in the last week or so. He and a team of volunteers staffed one of our feeding programs last week and can give you a firsthand report on what they're seeing in the field. Patrick, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Hey, thank you so much, Peter, and thanks for those who are joining us on the call and watching the recording of this throughout the week. First, I want to kind of report on one of the initiatives that we're taking on as Episcopal Charities. Is so many of our pantries have a desire to stay open, but they don't have the staff, the capability to stay open. So we're able to go in with a small group of kind of healthy volunteers, working under very safe conditions and best practices and protocol, all those kinds of things. And we're able to drop into a community, pack a bunch of boxes on a Friday, and then Saturday distribute. We distributed 150 essentially boxes of food that have multiple meals for family, and we handed those out in just about an hour. The advertised opening of that pantry on that Saturday morning was 11 o'clock, and we had people lined up at 9 o'clock. There was about 20 people lined up at 9 o'clock, and I don't know if you remember Saturday in the Bronx, it was cold and it was rainy. But what it goes to show us is that the need is so present. And just like Peter said, because so many of these programs are closing down around the city for various reasons, from not having enough volunteers, or they stayed open at the very beginning of this pandemic, and now their volunteers are exhausted, and they need to take a pause. They need to take a break for a time period just to kind of regroup and figure things out. But what we're seeing is we still have this really massive need that we're seeing kind of all over the diocese. I got a call 2 days ago from one of our program leaders up in Orange County, and the feeding programs got together there in Orange County and said, we need another pantry. We need another food pantry to help manage all of the new need that's coming up. And so we're partnering with a program to help open up an emergency pantry that we're expecting will be open for at least 6 months. But we have kind of review periods, 3 months out, 5 months out, those kinds of things, so that we can begin to see if it's still meeting a need, if it's still needed, and what we need to do to help sustain it. So because we're seeing a closure of a lot of pantries, a lot of feeding programs, what we're having to do at Episcopal Charities is to respond to that and to begin opening up different pantries where it's safe to do so, different feeding programs where we think we're able to have an impact. So that's one level of response that we have right now. One thing I keep going back to is this idea of flattening the curve, because this really impacts our feeding programs and all of our programs, really. We understand, thanks to everybody, social distancing and all of the things that everyone is doing. In New York, we've kind of flattened this curve a little bit right now, and hopefully we're on our way down. Now, what we understand is that the knee does not follow that curve whatsoever. The knee is just going to keep moving up. Now, maybe in six months or so, we might see that knee start to flatten. But if you saw reporting in the Times, those kinds of things, the CDC is expecting that we're going to have another big spike, potentially of COVID-19 in conjunction with the flu. That's going to happen at the end of the year, beginning of next year. So again, we're going to have another spike. And so while the knee kind of levels off, we think it's going to go back up again before it's going to level again. So one of the things that we have to do at Episcopal Charities, and one of the things that we're working on a lot right now, is trying to project out what the needs are going to be so that we can gear up financially for it, we can gear up institutionally. When social distancing is relaxed for a little bit of time, this way we can go into programs and get them set up in a new way so that when we start social distancing again, we can still operate at a little bit higher level than we were able to operate with the number of programs that are able to operate in a safe way. So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. We're in the immediate response, but we're also looking at what does the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months look like, because we understand the impact of all this is going to be that far out. So I just wanted to give you that context when we're thinking about feeding programs.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, what we're doing as an organization, the staff and the board, is we're definitely planning longer term. Patrick just mentioned, the next 6 months or so, and we're thinking that we will continue to see surges over the next 6 months through the end of 2020, basically. And I'd like to think we're wrong, and hopefully we may be a little bit too pessimistic, but we know that programs that depend on us need to know that we're going to be there, and we are committed to continue to support our outreach programs to try to meet the incremental needs you're seeing. Requests for emergency grants keep coming in. We've now approved 9 grants to programs totaling almost $45,000 from our COVID relief fund. We're continuing to work to seek additional sources of funding so that we can more adequately meet the demands that we're seeing across the diocese. And I want to take a moment to thank all those who've contributed over the past month or so. Patrick mentioned that deaths and infections are declining, but we're a long way from the end of this. And I also fear this second wave. But we're going to keep looking for additional funding. We're going to keep seeking new volunteers. We've mentioned this in the last couple calls. That same Times article that talked about reduction in feeding programs also talked about a surge in people volunteering. And part of this is, as we all feel kind of helpless and in the crosshairs of this pandemic, we're looking for ways to help. So certainly if you can volunteer, our programs could use your help. And again, if you can or will make a contribution financially, if you go to our website, www.ec-ny.org, we've got a couple of pretty easy to see tabs about volunteering and contributing. We also have some resources posted about best practices and ways to help in this time of crisis. Again, we thank you for your interest in what we're doing. We thank you for participating in these calls. Patrick and I are very happy to answer any questions you have. And as I've mentioned in the past, we're going to keep doing these calls every week until we kind of see this surge passing us by. And as long as we're getting applications for funding assistance, we want to be around to answer questions. We want to be around to help connect you with people that can help the work that you're doing in the field. So with that, SK, let's open the queue for questions.
All right. So if anyone has any questions, you can enter those into the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and I'll get those to Patrick and Peter.
I was thinking as people are kind of putting questions in, I had an interesting conversation with one of our program leaders who talked about a gentleman coming up to them just in tears, who said to this program leader, I never, ever thought I would ever be in a position where I would need to come in here. And this was a brown bag program and was just shaken up by it. So we know that there's lots of people that know the emergency food network, feel comfortable in it, know how to kind of move in and out of it. But now we're seeing a whole new population of people coming in who are terrified of it. Just, they never thought they would be in a position that they would need a sandwich, that they would need to go to a food bank, those kinds of things. And so that's one of the really, it's a powerful place to be at. And I love my program leaders who looked up and said, I'm so glad you're here. Come as much as you need. That's why we're here.
Yeah, and another advantage, we have as a faith-based organization, the most vulnerable among us are the undocumented. And government-sponsored or agency-sponsored programs are particularly problematic for them because there's this suspicion that it's a trap. I think there's something about a faith-based organization. If you're going to a pantry run out of a church, you're more likely to feel safe going there. I just see Linda's question about, are any of our pantries giving out groceries? Yeah. Not a meal as grab to go. Patrick, you can answer that more. We've changed the operating procedures in a lot of pantries just to make sure we've got social distancing and safety.
Yeah, so we have several programs that are still operating. We have a lot of our programs that are food pantry programs that have now kind of taken a pause for a couple of weeks. My expectation is most of those are going to begin to open back up in the next month or so. But what we're doing is we're going into those places and helping them do it safely. So we are not going to be for a while here, we're not going to be in a place that's going to bring people into buildings. But even the food bank or the food pantry that I worked at that we set up in the Bronx this past week, it was all done outside. So people are coming with their carts. We're getting 2 bags of groceries, a thing of juice, and they're walking through, keeping social distancing, those kinds of things. So if there's programs that are trying to figure out how they open back up in a safe way, be in contact with SK or myself. We're happy to walk you through and be in conversation to kind of help evaluate and see and kind of offer our suggestions as to what you might be able to do.
I mean, Bishop Dietschy's been very clear. He wants us to continue to do all that we can do to help people in need, but he also wants to make sure we follow to the letter all the New York State and the county guidelines and make sure that we keep clients and our volunteers safe.
Yeah, I can tell you, SK and I have done much reading and studying and making sure that the programs that we're being connected to and funding are working toward those goals and meeting those objectives and those standards.
I'm not seeing any more questions right now, but I'll just note that I've put links to both our donate page, our PayPal page, and to our main website in the chat, as well as Patrick's and my emails.
Well, thanks again, everyone. Stay safe. Take all the precautions you can. And as I said, we'll do this again next week. And feel free to call us, email us if you've got questions, in between meetings, and we'll do our best to hook you up to the right people to get you the assistance you need. So thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
All right.